Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we've got a deal for you. We're giving you a 2-for-1 because we're going to be going through our top 40 running back rankings in tiers Steve and Joe's. So you get 2-for-1. It's going to be exciting.
Hike!
Since we told the folks at home that this is going to be an exciting episode, Joe, why don't you start us off in tier number 1 with an explosive tier 1? Who do you got?
Yeah, in my tier 1 here, I've got Christian McCaffrey, Brees Hall, and Bijan Robinson.
Joe, that wasn't that explosive.
Those are some explosive players.
Nothing too crazy. For me, I've got number 1, Christian McCaffrey, 2, Brees Hall, 3, Bijan Robinson, and 4, Jahmyr Gibbs. For me, I was sort of surprised that I had Bijan Robinson after Brees Hall. I typically like Bijan Robinson better, but our rankings were determined based on projections that you and I both did for each team. I think partially the reason why I could see myself liking Brees Hall a little bit better is Arthur Smith isn't there anymore, but there's this I don't know how to say it, but there's like this in the Twitter space, X space, you're hearing rumblings of, oh, well, Tyler Algier might actually be more involved than you think. And we saw that with Arthur Smith, and I'm like to myself, are we in for it again?
Yeah, I mean, we could be. I think part of the problem is I think Tyler Algier he honestly is a good running back, and I think it's hard to not give him at least some touches. And I think, Bijan is an explosive player, and I'm just curious if they also want to try to keep some of the workload off of him to make sure, he makes it through the whole season, but also keeps giving the explosive plays and using him to, his best ability.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Whereas you have Brees Hall, I mean, you've got, Braylon Allen, in which he did look pretty decent in the preseason. I'll give him that, but he isn't much of a receiving threat. Really the big thing you'd worry about is maybe he vultures some touchdowns. But all in all, I think Brees Hall really, I don't see him having any threats for opportunities with Braylon Allen.
Yeah, and honestly, that's I've got him at number 2 as well. Was pretty surprised that you had Brees Hall at number 2. I know typically you're more outspoken about Bijan, and I think in drafts you would more so gravitate towards drafting Bijan and not Brees Hall. And I'm the opposite.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, Joe, I actually had Christian McCaffrey and Brees Hall pretty close together. So I mean, you'd be quite surprised as to how close they really were.
And for me, it's a 1-point difference. Not sure about you, but
now you're putting me on the spot here. I have McCaffrey at 322, and I have Brees Hall at 287.
Oh,
it's not that close, I guess.
Yeah, that's not close at all. If we're talking about 40 points, that's crazy.
Well, okay, all right, fine. But then I have Bijan Robinson at 284. So maybe Bijan and Brees Hall are more the ones that I should say those two are the more similar ones.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, and here's the thing. I mean, how about you? But I've avoided McCaffrey in drafts, which I know people think I'm nuts probably for saying that. But in auction drafts, you got to spend pretty decent coin to get him. And I don't know, Joe. That calf concerns me. I just, you could spend all that money on McCaffrey. If he's healthy and he does what he did last year, hey, he could help you win a championship. If he doesn't, it could be a tough road ahead. So that's my real concern when it comes down to McCaffrey. So that's why I lean towards Brees Hall and Bijan, because I don't have to spend as much. But interestingly, even in a draft that you and I did, McCaffrey and Brees Hall went more than McCaffrey, and Bijan went just as much. So maybe the tides are changing a little bit.
Yeah, I think honestly, if you are interested in McCaffrey and you don't think that the calf is a problem, then you can get him at a discount compared to years past. I mean, we've seen this guy, even last year going towards $70. And right now, like I believe in the draft that you're alluding to, he was under $60 in both Brees Hall and Bijan. I know Brees Hall was at $65. So there's a, decent amount of savings there. I'm like you, though. I am kind of concerned about the calf. And we've just seen, McCaffrey, since he came over to the 49ers, is that Iron Man. He really has been able to stay healthy. But now this cap's popping up. I don't know if it's as much of a problem at the running back position compared to how big of a problem it was for Joe Burrow last year. But nonetheless, I mean, running backs get injured. He's already starting with an injury. That makes me concerned.
Let's head over to tier 2, Joe. Who do you got there?
Yes, at number 4, I've got Isaiah Pacheco. Number 5, Alvin Kamara. 6, Jahmyr Gibbs. 7, Derrick Henry. 8, James Cook. And at 9, Travis Etienne.
Oof, there's a lot of players in this tier for you, sir.
Yes.
For me, I've just got number 5, Travis Etienne, 6, Saquon Barkley, and 7, Derrick Henry. Now, the big elephant in the room here is that you've got Isaiah Pacheco, number 4. I know you're bullish on him, but this is very bullish on Pacheco. We did see that, not that you or I thought that he was going to be that involved. You like Carson Steele anyways. I was wondering if, Reese Zamet was going to be involved at all in a third down capacity. Don't have to worry about that anymore. But you believe that he could be the full bell cow over in Kansas City.
Yeah, and that's simply just because that's what Andy Reid said. I mean, he was specifically asked not too long ago, what's your plan for third down since Jared McKinnon is no longer on the team? And he said Pacheco. And, we've seen when Andy Reid has got, trust in a true alpha running back, they go ahead and feed him the ball. Back when Sean McCoy was with the Eagles, he was a top tier running back. And I think Isaiah Pacheco has earned Andy Reid's trust, and I think they're just going to feed him the ball.
But what makes you so you just feel that volume wise? I guess my question is, for why you have him at 4, is it due to volume or is it due to explosiveness or a little bit of both? Because you've got him ahead of the likes of, for me, like Saquon Barkley, even a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. So, like, those guys are, maybe you don't get, Gibbs maybe, he has to share the backfield with Dave Montgomery, but he's very explosive. Barkley should have the volume and explosive, but maybe he can't stay healthy. So, what was it for you for Pacheco? Is he just getting a ton more volume, or you feel he's taking even a next step of being even more productive with the amount of carries and targets that he had last year?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm expecting that volume to increase. He showed that he could catch the ball last year, but I think he's going to get more receptions. Also, should get more carries as well. So it is partial volume, but then also I think Pacheco, he's kind of underrated for like his explosiveness, I feel like. And everyone, you can say he runs awkwardly and everyone says he's such an angry runner and he runs like he's angry at the ground. But yeah, he is somewhat of an explosive player, but that really truly the volume increasing and the fact that I'm not scared of anyone behind him is, what's led him to this point.
Yeah, it's just interesting because this is for a PPR setting. So,
Right.
how many, I'm just curious. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, how many targets and receptions do you have Pacheco getting?
You're looking at 66 targets and 58 receptions.
And what did he do the year prior?
He had 49 and 44.
Okay, so you're definitely seeing it's decent. That's like a 15, 20 plus uptick.
Yeah, 17 more targets over 20 or 14 more receptions. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that can move the needle 100%.
Yeah. Plus, I got added it, threw in an extra receiving touchdown as well. So I got him on 11 total touchdowns on the season. So
now for me, I can't fully understand why you're not a fan of Saquon Barkley. To me, the guy has been so productive in New York when he has been able to stay healthy. I get that's a question mark, and maybe that's why. Maybe based on fantasy points per game, he would be up there, but maybe you don't have him playing as many games. But for me, it's like the Eagles' offensive line was way better than what he dealt with in New York, even without Jason Kelce being there in the middle. So I just feel like so long as Barkley can stay healthy, and he has no real competition. Who is he really competing with in the backfield? Kenneth Gainwell? There's not really a lot. He is the guy. So now you could say maybe Jalen Hurts with the tush push with all the touchdowns, but you and I both wonder of whether or not with Jason Kelce gone, was he really the secret sauce for that to work?
Yeah, I do think he was kind of the secret sauce to that push play working. I will see if they continue to run it and see what kind of success it brings. But yeah, you pretty much hit it on the head. If we're looking at fantasy points per game, I mean, I've got Barkley at 17 fantasy points per game. Just only have him playing 14 games on the season. So if I would have statted him out even to play 2 more games, he would have been right up there in my tier 2.
Out of curiosity, how many fantasy points per game do you have for Pacheco?
At 16.3.
Okay, so Barkley, from a productivity standpoint on a per game average, he outpaces Pacheco, but he just isn't playing enough games.
That would be correct, yes.
Okay,
which leads you to what you were saying. Even though I do believe he's an explosive player, it's really that volume that's getting him those points. And for Barkley, he's playing less games, but I got him at 17 points a game.
One other one that's kind of interesting, you and I both have him here. Actually, we rank him right at the same spot. We both have Derrick Henry at 7. I like Derrick Henry quite a bit, but the thing is with Derrick Henry is, and I think I've read enough about him recently. It's like, okay, he gets 12 touchdowns for over 1,000 rushing yards, blah blah blah. Well, if he's not involved in the receiving game, like, how good is he really going to be? He almost has to be really, really good on the run. We got to hope that he gets 15, 16 touchdowns, I think, almost to pay dividends. So that's where it's like, is the path there? Absolutely. Could he be involved more in the receiving game? We saw him do it 1 year in Tennessee. So he is capable, but he's getting older. There's not a lot of options in Baltimore. So he's a really interesting one because I feel like, and he has never had a quarterback like Lamar who was able to have as much success on the ground himself.
Yeah, just Lamar doesn't run for a lot of rushing touchdowns, so it don't have that fear of the vulture. That's another thing with Saquon Barkley that it was hard for me to figure out his touchdowns because I do think, obviously Jalen Hurts is going to vulture some of those, not as much as DeAndre Swift because he just was the master of falling down at the 1 yard line for whatever reason. But back to Derrick Henry, even though we're talking about PPR, I do think his groundwork and the amount of rushing touchdowns he potentially can have. I mean, let's face it, Gus Edwards is not that good of a running back, and he got double-digit touchdowns last year and was fantasy relevant because he was getting 2 to 3 rushing touchdowns per game. If King Henry's able to do that, there's no reason he can't be top 10.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. All right, Joe, let's head over to tier number 3. What do you got there?
All right, in tier 3 at number 10, I've got Rachaad White and Saquon Barkley, Devon Achane, Kyren Williams, Joe Mixon, and Najee Harris.
All right, so at number 8, I've got James Cook. Number 9, Josh Jacobs. Number 10, Joe Mixon. Number 11, Jonathan Taylor. Number 12, Devon Achane. And number 13, Isaiah Pacheco. Now, I actually was really looking forward to talking about this tier for 2 reasons. Because there's 2 guys I really want to narrow in on for my reason and for your reason. So with a recent draft that we did, how nervous are you that now Sean McVay is coming out and saying that Kyren Williams is going to be the main punt returner? Does that bother you at all? That's kind of the main hysteria recently that we've been seeing on the social media network here.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not too thrilled about it. Just with there's a guy that's already had injury concerns heading into this year, and now you want to put kind of extra workload on him outside of how much workload he was getting just at the running back position. But that's also why, in that draft you're alluding to, that, I drafted Kyren prior to this news, that I made sure I got Blake Corum, and that's just one of those things. If you do draft Kyren Williams, make sure you get Blake Corum, because if something does happen to Kyren, Blake Corum is going to step in and should be able to will fill the shoes and should be a fantasy stud.
I gotta be honest, I think it makes absolutely 0 sense. I mean, I know McVay. Who am I, right? I'm just some fan of football that watches TV on my couch, right? I mean, McVay is,
I think part of the problem is if he doesn't do it, who will? And like, even as a rookie, he stepped in and was, before getting hurt, he was kind of the primary kick returner. So, I mean, he's got the he's got the experience to be a special teamer, and he's just so explosive. I could see, Sean McVay wanting to throw him in there just to get an extra opportunity and a guy, giving Kyron the ball more, and just seeing what he can do with it.
But the guy can't stay healthy.
No, I know. I hate it from a fantasy
problem.
perspective, but I can see kind of the reason why you do it on the actual NFL field.
Now, you and I ranked him this way. I haven't talked about him yet, but we ranked him this way prior to this news.
Correct.
Do you think it could change your viewpoint on him?
No, because at the end of the day, I mean, honestly, he'd be a lot higher if I had him playing more games. I only had him playing 13 games anyways, so I'm already expecting him to miss 4 games. And that was the only reason why he was, as low as he is on my rankings, because he's another guy, I had – if it was fantasy points per game, he would have been right up in their top 5.
Yeah, I got Kyron at 13 games. So I have.
Yeah, we got the same thing. So, I mean, I don't know how many more games I would have projected him missing, with this punt return news, but it definitely feel like justifies us putting him potentially only playing 13 games.
It's definitely a hot take. I think most people would have him a lot higher. We look a little bit better with the news about the punt return. I don't think most people are too enthusiastic about that unless you get punt return yards, which most leagues don't. So I don't like it. I was curious how you felt about it, and it sounds like you don't like it either.
I mean, I just did another snake draft tonight, and I took Kyron Williams, so I got him in the second round, and it was literally like 20 minutes prior to that punt return news coming out, and I was like,
Did you get Blake Corum?
Yes, once again I got Blake Corum. So that just it's my rule of thumb. It's since I drafted Kyron, immediately put Blake Corum in my queue so I didn't miss him and made sure I got him.
The other guy I want to talk about is running back Josh Jacobs, guy who recently in one of our drafts, I drafted him. I know you've been kind of mixed about him, but we just heard the news that, sad, but A.J. Dillon now done out for
Not
the
that
year.
Sad.
Well, I'm not trying to.
He's going to be irrelevant. Now he can be even more irrelevant.
Oh boy! All right. Well, at least you're just upfront, honest about it. I in my view, it's like, look, I don't want the guy to be hurt, but I'm just saying that it really clears the path for Jacobs to possibly amass a huge amount of volume. I mean, you've got Marshawn Lloyd dinged up. You've got Dillon out for the year. I know they like that Emmanuel Wilson guy, but the reality is Jacobs now, the whole concern with him was like, oh, well, I'm going to, is he going to be in a committee approach? And, we've seen, I know you'll say, well, LaFleur has always used a committee approach, but even Aaron Jones, it was more of a 60-40, and Aaron Jones with his explosion still made himself in almost a running back 1 conversation. I think he was more around a running back 2, but he still had weeks where he went off. So I would imagine that I believe this is a huge uptick for Jacobs. I think you have him too low, to be honest with you. I've got him a lot higher than you.
Yeah, I'm honestly just not that excited for him. I mean, I think this is an offense that likes to pass a lot, and they pass a ton in the red zone, so I don't have him scoring a lot of rushing touchdowns. And I think if Josh Jacobs would have went to a different team, I would be a lot more excited for him. But like I was telling you, there's no way this guy's going to get 400 touches like that tweet that you sent me. LaFleur simply just does not do that with his backs. Like you said, they like Emmanuel Wilson. Who knows if they, all these teams just had to cut all these players. Who knows if they don't like somebody out there that they want to add and just, toss in there. And I don't know how much, receiving work he's going to get, as these are PPR rankings. So I don't know. I'm nervous about Josh Jacobs. Like, I would have been a lot more excited for him if he would have just stayed in Las Vegas and kind of would have guaranteed that same volume that he had been receiving.
All right, Joe, let's head over to tier number 4. What do you got there?
All right, in tier 4, well, here we go, Steve. The aforementioned Josh Jacobs at number 17 here, or 16, sorry. At 17, Jonathan Taylor. 18, James Conner. 19, Raheem Mostert. 20, Kenneth Walker. And at 21, Javonte Williams.
All right, so then for me, I've got Ramondre Stevenson at number 14. Number 15, Alvin Kamara. Number 16, Najee Harris. Number 17, Kyron Williams. Number 18, Kenneth Walker. And number 19, Rachaad White. So as you can see, we have a few differences here. First off, with Rashad White, you've got him at 10. I've got him at 19. And the big reason for that is because I believe that Bucky Irving is going to be way more involved than you think, and you think he's an after fact. But our friend of the show, Dustin Ludke, agrees with me.
No, that's not, I mean, it is a little bit surprising to see.
It is.
Dustin
It
and I
is.
usually agree on things, but he's also got some hot takes out there as well. Yeah, I'm honestly not. Yeah, I mean, if you've been following along with us, I am not scared of Bucky Irving. You can go listen to some other episodes, and I've stayed pat on that. And I think Rashad White, will continue to just be that guy that Baker relies on, and he'll dump it down to him. And I think that volume will still be there for him.
That just surprises me so much because you were very critical of him last year, and that you every time I
Look,
used to
hey,
bring him
I
up, you
was
said
wrong
he's
about
not
Rashad White.
efficient. What? You said he wasn't efficient. The guy,
He's not.
He's
He's
a
not.
couple yards in a cloud of dust. You used to say.
Right, and he's not. He's not efficient, especially as a runner, but he just got so much volume, and especially volume in the passing game, that it made him, fantasy relevant, and honestly, he had a really good season last year.
Right. So if the volume isn't there though, then what?
Well, I'm expecting the same volume. You think it's going down because of Bucky Irving. I'm saying I am expecting that similar volume that he had last year to remain the same this year. I don't see much, changing on that. I don't think Bucky Irving is that good of a player to make an impact. I think this is a classic like last year, the Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. People were all worried about Tank Bigsby, and oh well, can't draft Travis Etienne because Bigsby was looking really good. He turned out to do absolutely nothing for the Jaguars last year and fumbled away his opportunities. And Travis Etienne was one of the top backs.
Another guy I want to talk about here that we have quite a big difference on, and you've kind of changed my mind a little bit on this. I've got Alvin Kamara at 15. You've got him at 5. Quite a drastic difference there. You've made me could be convinced a little bit on Kamara. I think for me the thing was I just didn't know. He was starting to get injured. I didn't know if he's going to play all 17 games. He is getting a little bit older, but as long as the big thing for me, and this is where you and I disagree, so long as Derek Carr is the quarterback for the Saints for the entire season, then I say, okay, great with Kamara. But if Spencer Rattler is the quarterback, that makes me a little bit more cautious. And Rattler has looked, you got to say, I know you don't think it's going to happen, but you have to say Rattler has looked good in the preseason.
Yeah, at the same time, it's also preseason, and he gets to play against a bunch of backups. And yes, he did look good when he was out there, but
But what do the Saints have to lose if the Saints are awful, which they should be?
The only way I see Spencer Rattler getting in there over Derek Carr is if Dennis Allen gets fired. I'm not so sure that happens because I think the Saints defense is good enough to where they're not, they're going to be in the games. And I think it would have to look really bad and almost Dennis Allen to pull Josh McDaniels last year where it just loses the locker room. And then I think Spencer Rattler comes in.
He could, though. He could. I don't think Dennis Allen seems like a guy who could. I mean, he was a retread coach from the beginning. He had familiarity with Sean Payton, and that's why they brought him in, because he was a friendly face. But I don't know. He just I wouldn't be surprised if he loses the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, to my knowledge, he hasn't lost it yet. And look, winning cures all. Winning cures all. If they're winning, I mean, let's face it, the NFC South sucks. That division is terrible, and it's going to be really hard for them, I feel like, to be a dumpster fire and for all that stuff to happen.
One other guy I want to talk about quickly. You've got Jonathan Taylor at 17. I've got him at 11. That might be one of the lowest I or anyone else has seen, that you have him at 17. Now, you're not that much of a Richardson fan, so I am a little surprised that you still feel this way about Taylor.
Well, that's because their starting quarterback is a running back. If they had an actual quarterback, I'd be a lot higher on Jonathan Taylor, but their RB1 is AR-15 because he can't throw the ball. All he is a glorified running back that plays quarterback. So, and I mean, Jonathan Taylor, he doesn't really get involved in PPR, and they're not Richardson's not going to dump the ball to him because he's an athletic running quarterback, so they just don't do that. And then you're looking at Anthony Richardson vulturing a ton of touchdowns. The dude averaged a touchdown per game in the 4 games he did play last year. So if Joe Flacco was the starting quarterback, I'd be a lot higher on Jonathan Taylor.
I'm glad this is recorded so that we can look back in the history books a
You'll
year
see,
from now
man.
and see
Anthony
how good Anthony Richardson
he
is.
cannot throw. And I mean, the Bengals were laughing at him. They said they can't even get defensive work in because the dude doesn't throw. All he does is run.
Well, okay, what else are they going to say? He was great.
No, they disappointed because the DBs couldn't even get their work in and show that they can play to the coaches.
All right, let's head over to tier 5.
All right, so tier 5 at number 22, I've got Zamir White, 23 Jerome Ford, 24 Aaron Jones, 25 David Montgomery, 26 Chase Brown, and 27 Tony Pollard.
All right, so for me at number 20, I've got Tony Pollard, 21 Austin Eckler, 22 Trey Benson, 23 Jonathan Brooks, and 24 Aaron Jones. So ultimately, this is where things are really starting to be different compared to you and me on this. The only one that we really have the same in this tier is Aaron Jones and Tony Pollard. What name really sticks out for you, either on my side or your side, Joe?
I've got 2 different players than you, between Jerome Ford and Chase Brown.
You think that Jerome Ford is going to be really good, and the fact that Nick Chubb will take longer for Nick Chubb to come back?
Well, I think, yeah. And I think the one thing you were concerned about when we've talked about this before was Deonta Foreman. And guess what? He was just cut today. So I think, Jerome Ford, for the time that Nick Chubb, the longer he's out, the better. And I think the volume is going to be there for Jerome Ford. When he got the opportunity after Nick Chubb went down, he was a very fantasy relevant running back. And I think he consistently gets overlooked in drafts. So I think he's a sneaky draft pick.
Yeah, one key difference between you and me, I mean, you've got James Conner at 18. I've got Trey Benson at 22. You're not going to like where I have James Conner. I just think that at the end of the day, they're going to want to use Conner's on a 1-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. I think eventually what's going to happen is just over time, you're going to see this effect where it's going to be heavy Conner. And then as the year goes on, that scale is going to get tipped. And I think eventually it's going to be the Trey Benson show.
Well, it's going to be the Trey Benson show once Conner gets hurt.
That as well, because Conner, if you look at his career, he always gets hurt at least once.
He's never played a full season in his entire career. So
That's what I'm saying.
Just the lane of the inevitable. But in those I've got him playing 13 games, and in the 13 games, I think he's going to he's going to be the leader of the workload there, and I think he's going to be very valuable, while he's in there, like he always is.
I guess, but I mean, you could argue who has he really competed with in Arizona? I mean, I don't know if there's been a caliber of running back that he has went up against.
I mean, he's only got 1 year left on his deal. He's going to want to show other teams that he can still play. Well, why would the Cardinals rush along Trey Benson when they can just use up the guy on the last year of his contract? Your ideology doesn't make sense.
Connor's on the doorstep of retirement. The NFL. Yeah. At the end of the day, the Cardinals, the NFL is a business. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, James Conner will mean nothing to them towards the end of the season. Or when he gets injured, it's going to be Trey Benson's going to take over.
Well, right, and I don't disagree with you, but I think the fact that you have him, that means you think while James Conner is playing that he's basically going to be doing nothing, which he's always been.
No, I didn't say that. I just don't think
based on your rankings, that's really where you have him, and you think that Trey Benson's going to outplay him, which doesn't make any sense to me. Because while James Conner is in there, he's always been a productive player. I don't see that changing, and Trey Benson will be able to get his work in once Conner's hurt.
One other thing, I'm going to do a little bit of a teaser here. One thing I'm surprised about, you do not have Jonathan Brooks in your top 40. Is that just because you think that they're going to not rush him along I mean, I know he's on the pup list right now.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just not that excited for a player that's coming off the ACL injury in the first year. We know that the fantasy production just doesn't seem to be there. Obviously, Brees Hall was kind of an anomaly with that last year. But typically it's the second year, so I'll be a lot more excited about Jonathan Brooks next year. And you mentioned it, he's already starting on the pup. Who knows how long it's, maybe it's just the 4 weeks, but we'll see how long it takes him to get back. Right now, I mean, Chuba Hubbard, looking like he's got the job right now.
All right, Joe, let's head over to tier number 6. We got there.
All right, at 28, Ezekiel Elliott, 29, DeAndre Swift, 30, Tajay Spears, and at 31, Devin Singletary.
All right, so for me at 25, I've got Javonte Williams, 26, David Montgomery, 27, Zamir White, 28, Tajay Spears, and 29, DeAndre Swift. So I didn't talk about him earlier because I knew I was going to talk about him later. I was going to go back to your homer pick of Javonte Williams. Now, I like Javonte, but is there any part of you that's concerned that the Broncos on their 53-man roster decided to keep 4 running backs on the roster? I'm a believer that they're going to use Audric Estime more so than you think they will. You've got Jaleel McLaughlin, who already will be a factor. So to me, it's like I like Javonte. I just question how much they'll just purely give him the ball. Like, how many carries does he get a game? 10 carries a game? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair. I mean, obviously he will split with Jaleel McLaughlin. Estime, I'm not as concerned about. He's a rookie, and I guess we should find out more as far as what the plans for the Broncos, third down back. But I still, I mean, I like Javonte a lot. Second year coming back from the ACL, as I mentioned before, like guys, 2 years removed from that injury, and from what I've seen, in preseason, they're still giving the majority of the workload to Javonte, and I think he's going to get those first opportunities. So I know that it's going to be a running back by committee. I still think, Javonte will be getting the majority of the carries, though.
Another guy I think is kind of interesting. I've got Zamir White at 27. You have him at 22. I wanted to rank him higher, but I just don't know how involved he's going to be as a receiving entity. I think he'll obviously have a lot of carries and a lot of touchdowns running the ball. He's basically, in my view, he's Derrick Henry light at this point.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I've got him projected for a decent amount of volume. I was honestly kind of surprised where I have him myself because I'm not I think he's intriguing, but I don't, his upside, especially in PPR, is definitely capped, like you mentioned, just because he doesn't catch it. And they have, they drafted Dylan Lobby. It seems like they're excited about him, and he's going to be more so that pass catcher.
All right, Joe, let's head over to tier number 7. What do you got there?
All right. At 32, I've got Ramondre Stevenson, 33, Jalen Warren, 34, Brian Robinson, and 35, Tyler Algier.
All right, so number 30, I've got Jerome Ford, 31, Chase Brown, 32, Blake Corum, 33, Zach Moss, and 34, Brian Robinson. Now, to me, it's an absolute travesty that you have Ramondre Stevenson at 32, whereas I have him at 14. What did Ramondre Stevenson ever do to you?
He's just not a guy that excites me. And he doesn't, he's another guy that I figure that he's going to get injured.
So you think the 1 year he had was just an anomaly then?
Yeah, he plays on a bad offense with the Patriots. I don't know what kind of output they're
How
going to have.
bad will it be if Drake May's the quarterback?
Well, that's the thing. I think it's even worse if Drake May plays. I get, X is all about the flashy plays and the big plays. I understand, but I just think he's going to be inconsistent and not moving the ball enough. And if the offense isn't on the field, that's limited opportunities for their whole offense. And again, rookie quarterbacks are not good for running backs either, especially the mobile ones. So here we go. Even if Drake May is the starter, that makes me feel even worse about Ramondre. And it's already a guy that I'm not excited about.
I just think that he's going to be the focal point of the offense. That's
I don't disagree with you. He will be the focal point of the offense. I mean, I think Antonio Gibson could have a third down role, but Ramondre definitely will. But it's still, I'm not excited about it.
The other guy who I think is kind of interesting, I thought he'd be higher in my mind, Brian Robinson. I think he could do quite well. I guess really the biggest problem is whether you see him and Eckler. That's the big question. Now, obviously, I have Eckler doing a lot better than you do, and I think that's partially because I think he had a lot of rushing touchdowns in LA. He was known for that. He's also a great receiver, and at this point, the Commanders don't have a lot of options. So I think unfortunately for Brian Robinson's sake, I don't think he's going to be involved as much on third downs, which limits his upside.
Yeah, honestly, I think I like him better than how the projections and how he ranks out as well. Obviously, we both have him at 34, ironically enough. But I am intrigued by him. But I agree. I mean, he's definitely more of the first and second down player, and Eckler comes in. So big carry. I do think he does break a decent amount of tackles, gets a decent amount of rushing yards. So I am curious to see how he does on this Commanders offense.
All right, Joe, let's close it out. Who do you got into your number 8?
All right, at 36, I've got Antonio Gibson. 37, Austin Eckler. 38, Zach Moss. 39, J.K. Dobbins. And at number 40, Jaleel McLaughlin.
All right, at number 35, I've got Raheem Mostert. 36, James Conner. 37, Devin Singletary. 38, Ray Davis. 39, Jaleel McLaughlin.
Ray
number
Davis.
40, Jalen.
And you say I'm a homer.
Joe, there is significant concern when it comes to James Cook. You have way too much faith in this guy. He cannot catch. He's
catch?
Okay, he's inconsistent. All right, I was trying to gather my words. You're putting me on the spot. He's inconsistent. Okay, I like James Cook, but Ray Davis is a 3-down back.
Do you realize if James Cook would have just had 3 more touchdowns last year, he would have been a top 5 running back in fantasy?
But he didn't. So what does it matter?
Well, I'm just saying, if
he literally had a touchdown. He literally did like I can't even think of the route right now, but he did like a scissor route. He was wide open. If he caught the ball, he would have got into the end zone. The Bills probably beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. Just right through his hands.
Get over the one play that could have helped out the Bills. Look, if the Bills didn't play scared in that playoff game, they could have beat the Chiefs, but they said they got in their own head. Oh, don't want to give Patrick Mahomes the ball, so they got ultra conservative. And honestly, they beat themselves because they also put a ton of pressure on Tyler Bass, which that he's inconsistent, especially in those high pressure moments in the playoffs. So I don't want to hear just one drop by James Cook.
I'm just giving. No, it doesn't. We're not talking about. The point of the matter is that he drops balls. That's the point. The point is he dropped balls. You can't deny that.
I don't think he drops as many as you're making it out to be. And I'm
telling you, Ray Davis, I'm warning you right now, Ray Davis is going to be way more involved than you think.
That's so ridiculous. Ray Davis, just because he looks good against third stringers, you think he's going to be more part of the offense.
Okay. Hey, look, you saw with the offense under Joe Brady, they used the running back position way more than they did.
What they do with James Cook.
I get that, but that's based on your confidence that they're going to continue to just use James Cook and him alone. I don't see that. Ray Davis is a far better back than Latavius Murray. It's not even close.
Sure. Well, I mean, he's a lot younger. I don't know if that means he's better. We'll see.
All right. Well, time will tell on that one. But I am also interested in your thoughts on Raheem Mostert. You've got him at 19. I've got him at 35. I guess you must have more confidence. He's probably one of the most difficult running backs to rank because of how good he did last year. People are so excited about Achane, so you've got that element of it. For me, I'm kind of nervous about, or someone excited about the rise of Jalen Wright, the rookie out of Tennessee. I think he could be involved. He hasn't looked the best, but he's got speed, and we saw what Devin Achane was able to do. So where do you stand on Mostert?
Well, I'm expecting his role to kind of be very similar to what we saw last year. I mean, Achane, look, he's not a workhorse back. He's not a guy that you feed a ton of carries. He's exciting because he can do a lot with very little, and he's a flashy player. But Raheem Mostert, he's kind of the volume back, and he got a bunch of touchdowns. Obviously, you expect some touchdown regression there. But I feel like if he's able to stay on the field and doesn't get hurt early in the season, that he'll be right up there.
One guy I was disappointed with that I didn't have in my top 40, and I would have liked to have him there, is J.K. Dobbins, believe it or not. I've not been a fan of his, but I mean, we know that Jim Harbaugh loves to run the football. And, we saw Isaiah Spiller get cut. That was significant. So now you've got – why are you
Not
giving
for
me a face?
it wasn't significant for J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards. It was more significant for Kamani Vidal. But go ahead.
I think it was still significant for the running back room at large, because at the end of the day, it could have been a full committee approach. We didn't know what was going to happen. Yes, I agree. It helps Vidal because we heard Vidal was going to get cut. But I think one of these guys has to emerge as the alpha. I don't think it's just going to stay this committee. I think one of them is going to emerge. I think Dobbins probably has the best potential to if he's healthy. But I guess time will tell.
Yeah, that's ultimately why Dobbins ended up making it here, just because, it's going to be, obviously, it's a huge question whether or not he can stay healthy. That's ultimately what's kind of led him to not be on the Ravens any longer. Just he couldn't stay on the field. But I just think, Gus Edwards, he relies on touchdowns a lot. I don't, his upside's kind of capped, where J.K. Dobbins, he can catch the ball. He can do it all. And he's honestly, outside of Kamani Vidal, he's probably the most exciting back on the team in terms of for fantasy.
So that does it for our top 40 running back rankings and tiers. You got Steve and Joe's rankings in this episode. And if you enjoyed that, check out our most recent episode where we talked about the tight ends. And then before that, we talked about quarterbacks. And wait, we've got wide receivers coming up next. You're not going to want to miss it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.